I genuinely enjoyed watching Emily in Paris. And as terrible as the show is, I'm not the first to admit that. Basically, every review of the show ever throws in some sort of acknowledgement that as bad as it is, it's also kind of a good time. Fish out of the water comedies are usually liked, I guess, so it shouldn't be surprising that people like watching a determined American travel to a beautiful city and adapt to the new challenges there. Except Emily in Paris has one thing that most shows don't: a main character who is the absolute worst. I don't mean to undermine the show's other problems. It's ridiculous and terribly written.
Oh, when you dropped your crepe. Hashtag oh crepe.
But the main character is really the nail in the coffin. As Emily, the pinnacle of American entitlement, moves her way through Parisian work and society, it's hard not to grow to despise her. And I don't mean this like she's some flawed anti-hero. Rather, she's just kind of unlikable. Her jokes aren't funny. Her French is grating to say the least, and she's not even a very good person.
She pretended to be my friend while she had an affair with my boyfriend.
The show does its best to absolve her of her flaws, reminding us that her French is bad because she was a last-minute fill-in, and pitting her against an impossible-to-please Miranda Priestley-esque boss to evoke some more sympathy. Despite this, the character development isn't really there. She starts off feeling everything in France is bizarre and insane, and I guess gains a bit of appreciation for the French way, but her learning doesn't ultimately go very far. The show's fundamentally American gaze never dwindles, and the characters around Emily consistently concede in her favor. Instead of forcing her to develop, they largely come around to the American way and see its upsides.
We are all a little afraid of you. Your ideas, they are more new. Maybe they're better.
Seasons 2 and 3, to be fair, overcome a bit of this stuff. She puts a lot more effort into French, enough at least to hold a conversation.
La fameuse Gigi. Gabrielle m'a beaucoup parlé de vous. Ça me fait très plaisir de vous rencontrer.
Emily.
What? I'm learning.
The show also spends more time confronting Americanness, making it a tad more self-aware, and gives a bit of characterization to the supporting cast. Season 3 also hints at the idea that the people around Emily are negatively impacted by her disregard for others, but that plotline kind of just trails off. So even in seasons 2 and 3, Emily in Paris doesn't get that much better. It is still not very good. And yet I can't talk about the show without mentioning that it's nevertheless compelling, that Emily is still a fun character to follow. Her magical ability to generate spectacularly successful marketing ideas in seconds and make every man fall in love with her is unrealistic, sure, but it's fun. It allows us as viewers to live vicariously through her, just like her fictional Instagram followers do. But it's impossible to watch without remembering that the version of Paris we're seeing, that the version of being an American expat we're seeing, is entirely made up. I talked about the premise of a determined American moving somewhere new and how it makes sense that people like this, so it's also not a surprise that people like Ted Lasso. The show tells a shockingly similar but infinitely more well-loved story. Ted is also an American moving to a foreign country for work, who struggles with linguistic barriers, both with British slang and soccer terminology.
How worried are you about the threat of relegation?
Well, Lloyd, right now I'm mostly concerned with the definition of relegation.
And who is at first resented for his Americanness. In fact, Ted is even less equipped for the job than Emily. While Emily's language barriers hinder her, she seems theoretically good at her job. Ted, on the other hand, is pretty openly ignorant.
Heck, you could fill 2 internets with what I don't know about football.
And like Emily, he's loud, ridiculously positive, and full of painful one-liners.
You're actually here to meet with the Milk Sisters.
Oh, they won't be coming now.
Oh no, did they expire?
With all these similarities, you'd think Ted would be just as unbearable and hated as Emily. But something's different. Ted is curious. He wants to understand the UK, to understand the new people he's with and the world he's in.
Be curious, not judgmental.
His unawareness and unbridled enthusiasm can be a lot, and even annoy the people around him, and perhaps viewers. But in the end, as The Atlantic writes, Emily's ignorance is existential. Ted's is conditional. The entire show is also more well-made in its own right. It's ultimately an ensemble comedy, with almost every character being well-developed and interesting. Ted himself, although he at first seems pretty one-dimensional, also has a more human, emotional side, and compelling relationships with the people around him. And like Emily in Paris, Ted Lasso sees improvements in season 2. Specifically, it works to confront topics of genuine self-help and therapy, not just endless, perhaps unhealthy, optimism and positivity. So there's a bit of a dissonance in the reception to these two shows, because they are in many regards extremely similar. They have the same attributes: an optimistic, friendly, and clueless protagonist, a boss who's out to get them, a long-term relationship that ends soon after arriving in the new location, and even the same song at the end of the first season. But the characters' understandings of their situation are vastly different. Ted has a certain self-awareness. While Emily is shocked that France can't appreciate her clearly superior approaches, Ted seems to realize that his aggressively American attitudes and practices can be a bit of a burden, and he's willing to learn.
If I were to get fired from a job where I'm putting cleats in the trunk of my car,
You got the boot for putting boots in the boot.
I love that.
Not only does he possess this individual awareness, but some national awareness. Though he's a very American guy,
Hey, how y'all doing?
he also knows America isn't anywhere close to perfect.
I don't really have the same fondness for the American military that you do.
Oh, sure. Right. Imperialism. Right, yeah.
Thank you, Coach.
His various misadventures eventually lead him to find a middle ground between the two nations, where both him and his colleagues change a bit for the better. None of this is to say that Emily in Paris isn't a fun show, because to be honest, sometimes Ted Lasso's on-the-nose sincerity made me prefer Emily in Paris. I certainly preferred watching it while preparing for this video, just because I really don't like Ted. For me, he always felt like a Mr. Peanut Butter from BoJack Horseman type, full of stupid one-liners and unbridled enthusiasm that can be funny, but I don't want to watch an entire show about. But that's just me. I am a young brunette who has spent time in Paris and been told I look like Lily Collins. And I'm nothing like Ted Lasso, and I'm pretty sure I don't look like him, nor do I care about soccer, so of course I might find Ted a little less fun. But in my mind, Emily in Paris is instant gratification, while Ted Lasso is more drawn out. The former is admittedly engaging, but by the end of it, you don't care about the characters. They're forgettable at best, unlikable at worst. The show is also fundamentally lighter. Couples break up, friends scream at each other, but the episodes verge on self-contained given how quickly last episode's issues fall away. For better or for worse, there's no emotional depth. Ted Lasso, on the other hand, starts off a lot slower without all the addictive love triangles and drama. But you ultimately develop a connection with the story and characters, and by the end, it's actually rewarding. It probably goes without saying that TV shows centered around cultural struggle between America and Europe tend to say something about America and Europe. The general state of the world in recent years has led to a lot of concern over what Americanness is, and if it can be anything good. Whether it be shifting politics or worldwide disasters, there's been a rise of, likely justified, insecurity about the American identity. In fact, about 2/3 of Americans view the US as being in a state of decline. But there's a long-standing desire to see your home country as exceptional and valuable, so Emily in Paris serves as a kind of escapism from this disillusionment about the state of the US.
The French are masters of social media.
True. But Americans invented it.
It tells us rather blatantly that the American perspective is still super valuable, and that it can still be super useful for other cultures. Ted Lasso also brings valuable insight to his new place of work, but these insights derive from the talents of Ted himself. His determination and positivity are what allow him to improve the team, not some inherent Americanness. The show isn't afraid to bring up some painful truths about America's relationship with the rest of the world, which is part of what gives it so much more depth than Emily in Paris. Both shows ultimately confront the question of what it means to be American. Emily's version of Americanness is a fantasy. She thinks the French are weird, and everything from their ways of counting floors to their opinions on work. When a neighbor says he's from Normandy, she says,
"Oh, I know that beach. Saving Private Ryan."
And both Emily and the show itself, as Megan Garber writes, regard Paris as not a place but a consumer good. And yet, her coworkers and friends still change to better adhere to her American values. Ted Lasso's answer to what it means to be American is a little more real, because he starts out equally cheesy and obnoxious, and many don't like it. He starts out equally ignorant, and soccer fans are upset by it and call him out for it. And then he develops beyond a caricature, and we realize that Ted isn't exceptional because he's American, he's just exceptional because he's Ted. So while Emily in Paris is fun, it's just not capable of truly redeeming itself from being perpetually annoying, because its premise is based around a falsehood, that of American superiority.
Though I believe that Ted Lasso will fail here and Richmond will suffer the embarrassment of relegation, I won't gloat when it happens, because I can't help but root for him.
Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear in the comments your thoughts on these two shows or on any other American expat-based pieces of media, and I'll see you next time.